In February 1815, a terrifying rumor electrified Europe. Napoleon Bonaparte, the emperor who had conquered the continent, had escaped his island prison of Elba. The ogre, as his enemies called him, was free. He landed in France with just 1,000 men, but the French army sent to arrest him could not resist their old leader. They knelt before him, shouting, "Vive l'Empereur! Long live the emperor!" Without firing a single shot, Napoleon marched triumphantly into Paris. He had reclaimed his throne in a mere 20 days. But he knew this was just the beginning. The great powers of Europe, Britain, Prussia, Austria, and Russia, declared him an outlaw and began assembling massive armies to destroy him once and for all. Napoleon's only chance was to strike first, and to strike hard. The fate of Europe would be decided by two men who had never faced each other in battle. On one side, Napoleon Bonaparte, the revolutionary, the master tactician, the most brilliant military mind of his age. He believed his presence alone on the battlefield was worth 40,000 men. He needed one last decisive victory to secure his legacy forever. On the other side stood Arthur Wellesley, the Duke of Wellington. The Iron Duke was Napoleon's opposite, an aristocratic, defensive genius. He was patient, pragmatic, and unshakable under pressure. He had spent years studying Napoleon's methods and knew that to defeat the emperor, he had to choose his ground perfectly and hold it, no matter the cost. Napoleon's plan was simple and daring. He would march his army into Belgium and destroy the British and Prussian armies before the Austrians and Russians could join the fight. He caught his enemies by surprise, defeating the Prussians under the command of the fierce old warrior Marshal Blücher at the Battle of Ligny. Wellington was forced to pull his Anglo-Allied army back. He retreated to a place he had scouted a year earlier, a low ridge near a small village named Waterloo. He knew this was the ground where he would make his stand. He sent a desperate message to the defeated Prussians, asking for their help. Blücher, though wounded, famously promised, "I shall come, even if I have to be tied to my horse." The night before the battle, on June 17th, the heavens opened. A torrential thunderstorm turned the battlefield into a sea of deep, thick mud. On the morning of June 18th, Napoleon was ready to attack at dawn, but his artillery commanders begged him to wait. The ground was too soft to move the heavy cannons, and cavalry charges would be impossible in the mire. Reluctantly, Napoleon agreed. He delayed the start of the battle until almost noon. This decision, born from tactical necessity, would prove to be his doom. Every minute he waited was another minute the Prussian army could march toward the battlefield. The fate of Europe was now a race against time. The battle, when it began, was a brutal, bloody struggle. The French threw themselves against Wellington's lines, focusing on key strongpoints like the fortified farmhouse of Hougoumont. The fighting there was merciless. In the mid-afternoon, one of Napoleon's most famous marshals, Michel Ney, mistook a movement of British troops for a retreat. In a moment of impulsive glory, he led the greatest cavalry charge of the era. Over 5,000 French horsemen thundered up the ridge. But Wellington's infantry was not retreating. They formed impenetrable defensive squares. The French cavalry swirled around these islands of red in a sea of steel for hours, charging again and again, but the squares never broke. The pride of the French cavalry was shattered. As the sun began to set, Wellington looked anxiously to the east. His lines were stretched to the breaking point. His famous prayer was for night or Blücher. And then he saw them. On Napoleon's right flank, the first black columns of the Prussian army appeared from the woods. Napoleon was stunned. He had believed the Prussians were broken. Now he was forced to turn his precious reserves to fight a second army. His grand plan was unraveling. The battlefield had been tilted against him. With his army being crushed from two sides, Napoleon played his final card. He committed his last reserve, the most legendary soldiers in Europe, the Imperial Guard. These were the elite, the undefeated veterans who had followed him across the continent. With drums beating, they marched in perfect formation up the muddy slope for one final attack. Wellington, seeing them coming, gave his famous order, "Now, Maitland, now's your time." Over 1,500 British foot guards who had been lying hidden behind the ridge rose as one and delivered a devastating volley of musket fire at point-blank range. The Imperial Guard faltered. For the first time in their history, the cry was heard, "La Garde recule!" The Guard is retreating. The cry shattered the morale of the entire French army. The retreat became a rout. As Wellington gave the signal for a general advance, his army surged forward. Napoleon was swept from the field, his empire turning to dust around him. The Napoleonic Wars were over.
The story has come to an end. If it left a powerful impression on you, please consider supporting the channel with a like and subscription. It's the best way to ensure more stories like this can continue to be told. Thank you.